everybody, welcome! Our first meetup of 2022. It is amazing to be back here. And I'm joined today by the amazing Marcus, my fellow co-host. I suppose it's a bit late, but yeah, Happy New Year still. How are you doing?
Can we still say that? Yeah, sure. Why not? Why not? Yeah, no, I'm doing great. I'm very happy that we're back, and we have amazing speakers for today. And it's good seeing you again, and also seeing the progress on Twitter the last couple of days on your amazing setup behind you.
It's been amazing putting this together, and what shocked me most is the result that you can get just with a couple of IKEA cabinets and one Philips Hue bulb.
Yeah, the placement of the light, that's really key to everything. So that's really amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get to show off the Lego. Always good to show off the Lego.
Yes. Okay. Oh yeah. So maybe next time you could do like different spotlights on different Lego models, and each time you can highlight a different model and talk about it.
It's I've got a strip light from IKEA, and my plan is to hack it, to cut it into strips, and then to make extension cables and have a different light on each shelf. It's all going to be the same color because it's just a cheap IKEA light, but at least get a little bit more light directly behind me, so that you can see the models as well.
Exactly. Yeah. For me, they're a bit too far away, really, to be seen well. But okay, yeah. But we'll do a dedicated Lego for themed one next time. All right. Let me start by sharing my screen.
We have our general notifications to go through. So
exactly. So we're still doing online meetups. Still no concrete plans on doing real life meetups. Maybe around the summer or after summer, we'll see. As always, it's the first Wednesday of the month that we do this meetup, so you can already reserve your time in your agenda. And we live stream on YouTube and Twitch, and we also have a Discord server, so feel free to join us there, and you can use to ask questions and communicate with us and also the speakers. So feel free to use this invite link to join our Discord. And we also have some house rules, so this is the link for our code of conduct, so please make sure you read this and follow all the rules.
Be nice to each other.
Exactly, that's neat. The very short version, you just be kind and nice to each other. All right, and the agenda for today is our first speaker, Benoit Bourret. We'll talk about a quick introduction to GraphQL and AWS AppSync. Then we'll have a short break, and our second speaker is Shreya Gupta, making serverless education accessible. Finally, if you're seeing this and you think, this is a nice meetup, and I also want to say something about something serverless or serverless related, or maybe you think, okay, yeah, I can do this much better than Mark or Stace, and I want to take over the hosting. Okay, you can try. Please get in touch. You can reach us by email, amsterdam@serverlessdays.io. You can reach us on Twitter, ServerlessDMs, and of course through the Discord.
And if you want to speak and it's your first time, then also please get in touch. We'd love to help people getting started in this as well. The first time speaking can be such an overwhelming thing, but if you want to do it, we want to help you.
Definitely. Yeah, we're very open to first-time speakers. So if you want to help us with some kind of an abstract or making the slides or doing kind of a demo run, feel free to ask us about that. All right, I think it's time to add our first speaker, Benoit.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. It's I love GraphQL. I've just never made the time to actually give it a try. So this one is this one's going to be really cool for me.
Awesome.
Hello there. How are you doing?
Hello.
Can I check that I can pronounce your name correctly? Because I'm sorry, I'm English and I am truly terrible with names. This is Benoit?
Yeah, kind of. It's Benoit. Yes.
Benoit.
Easy. Yeah, perfect.
Welcome, Benoit. Thank you for joining us. And truly, I apologize for completely hacking your name there.
It's no problem. It's all right.
All right.
Ah.
We give the stage to you, Benoit.
Yeah,
And
awesome.
if you want, maybe you can do QAs during the session or after session. It's up to you. You'll be enjoying your talk.
Yeah,
Perfect.
take it
Thank you.
away.
Yeah. Right. So thanks everyone for being here and for listening to me today. My name is Benoit. I'm a serverless developer at Serverless Guru, and I've been working with serverless since around 2018, maybe. First with some side projects and some very small project, right? But since I would say last year, I started becoming a full-time serverless developer. And since last year, I've also been, I'm so excited about this, an AWS community builder. I really like being part of that community. It's really great. And I also maintain the AppSync plugin for the serverless framework. So if you are interested into this one, just have a look at this. And if you have questions, I'd be happy to help. You can also follow me on Twitter. My handle is there. There's my blog as well and my GitHub if you want to get in touch. So today, I want to talk about GraphQL and AppSync. So I will first try to give a quick introduction to GraphQL, what it is, how it works, and then I will go deep dive, give a high level introduction of AppSync and what it is. So GraphQL. What is GraphQL? GraphQL is a query and manipulation language for APIs. Basically, it allows you to manipulate and explore your data as a graph. It is not to be confused, though, with graph database like Neptune. It's not what it is at all. It just allows you to query your data as a graph, as I said. Your data might be in any kind of data source, as I will explain later. And also, GraphQL is a specification more than it's actually a library or a software. It actually has already some several implementations written in different languages like Java or JavaScript, Rust, Ruby, etc. The base of GraphQL is the schema. And the schema is what defines the shape and the type of your data. So on the left, you would see an example. We have some users. Users has an ID, it has a name, it has an email, and you can see that they have types. GraphQL also allows you to specify if a field is required, if it's not required, if it can be nullable or not. And the great thing about GraphQL is that it validates that at runtime. So you don't have to worry about it or write any custom validation routines to do that. It's still limited, though, to the shape and the type and the requirement of the given fields. If you do want more specific validations, for instance, you might have a user and you want to validate that the user is 18 years old or more. You still can, if you want, write some custom validation, maybe with AJV, if your implementation is in JavaScript, for instance. The second important part of GraphQL is or are the different type of queries that it comes with. And the first one are simple queries. And queries allow you to fetch data, so it retrieves the data from your data sources. Could be like a user or a post, if it's a blog or something like that. In a more traditional REST API, that would correspond to a GET operation. Then we have mutations, and mutations are used to manipulate the data and the data source. So you can write, edit, or delete some data. So that corresponds to REST, post, put, and delete operations. And finally, one super great feature about GraphQL are subscriptions. And subscriptions is a special type of query that allows clients to subscribe to real-time notifications and receive change sets or receive notification when something in the data happens. And I will talk about this a bit later. Now, the best way to actually explain what GraphQL is and why it's great is with a simple example. So imagine that you have an application, a client that needs to retrieve a user, a picture, a profile picture of the user, and maybe some addresses. So the first thing you would do in a REST API is first call and get the user entity or the user payload. That payload will probably contain some IDs, an ID to the profile picture, some IDs to the addresses, and then your client will have to use that to execute other queries that will retrieve that data. And basically, that comes with two issues. The first one is that you have to execute all these operations sequentially, and the client has to wait until it retrieves the IDs of the images and the addresses in this case to execute a second operation. So it's more time, it's time that the client has to wait before it has everything it needs to actually show it to the user, right? So this is actually a problem that is called underfetching, because the client doesn't get everything it needs in just one single operation, one single query. So it's basically slower. And the second problem with that is that in REST, usually your payloads will be returned as they are emitted by the API. But the client, in the end, might not need everything. So, for example, the user might have a description, a biography that is a very long chunk of text that the client doesn't need to show to the user. So why retrieving it? Because it just adds more data to the payload, and it slows down the query as well. And that second problem is called overfetching. GraphQL tries to solve these two issues. And the way it does this is by acting as basically doing what REST would do, but in the API layer instead. So you would see that GraphQL would fetch first the user, then fetch the image details, then the address details, but it all happens in the GraphQL layer, which is probably much closer to your data sources than your actual client. And after that, GraphQL will actually strip down everything that the client didn't request. So if the client didn't request the biography of the user, it will just remove it before the query and the request is returned to the client, which removes a big chunk of text from the payload and makes it a little bit faster. Now, that's what GraphQL is in a nutshell. Now, AppSync, basically what is AppSync is an implementation of GraphQL that is provided and offered by AWS. It's fully managed, which means you don't have to manage servers, you don't have to configure or maintain these servers. And it's, of course, it's serverless. That's the great thing about it. It's serverless. You don't pay for idle, and it scales. It will scale to thousands of requests per second. And in the case of subscriptions, it will even scale to millions of concurrent subscriptions at the same time. And AppSync will handle everything for you without having to worry about it. With AppSync, you provide your schema that you define in Vins, your data sources and your resolvers, about which I will just talk a bit later, and everything is managed for you. Now, let's talk about data sources. The data sources in AppSync is a way to define what or where your data comes from. And AppSync supports 5 different data sources. The first one is DynamoDB for NoSQL databases and, of course, being fully serverless as well. Lambda allows you to have a greater control on your business logic. Maybe you want to transform your data, you want to alter it a bit, you want to validate it. Or you can also use Lambda if you want to access a data source that is not provided and not supported by AppSync out of the box. So it could be, for instance, if you have a Neptune database, which is not supported by AppSync, well, you still can access your database through Lambda using JavaScript, Python, or whatever language you like. The third one, the third data source supported is OpenSearch, which is a replacement for Elasticsearch. So basically that offers search capabilities for your API. So maybe you will have your users indexed in a domain, and that will allow other users to search for each other maybe. Then you have Aurora, that's for more traditional relational databases. And finally, you have HTTP. And HTTP is basically a REST data source, and it can be useful, for instance, if you want to access a partner API that is written in HTTP, or maybe you have a legacy REST API and you want to migrate to GraphQL. And instead of rewriting everything, you will just reuse that REST endpoint and wrap GraphQL around it. And slowly, later, you might just move and migrate all these endpoints to pure GraphQL. But if you wanted to go fast, that's something you could do. And yeah, one last one, which is not really data source. It's more like of a fake data source. It's a local resolver, as we call them as well. And that kind of data source is not connected to anything, to any data layer, but it allows you to execute some custom logic. So one simple example would be if you want to echo back what the client sent in a mutation, for instance, or it's also very often used with subscriptions because I will explain later, but subscriptions react to mutations, and sometimes executing a fake mutation is a way to send something to subscribers without having to mutate real data in a database, for instance. So that's the kind of use case you would use a local resolver with. Of course, you are allowed to mix and match all these data sources in one single API, in one single GraphQL API. For instance, your users might be stored in DynamoDB. And if you want to get one user, you have its ID, so you can go get it from DynamoDB using the partition key. On the other hand, if you wanted to search for a user by name, by email, and you don't necessarily have an index for this in your database, or you just want to have a search without knowing the exact key, well, you could connect then OpenSearch to AppSync and use that in another query to actually do that kind of operations. All data sources can be used separately in different queries without any problem. Now, the second part of GraphQL and AppSync are resolvers. And you can see actually resolvers as functions that actually execute an operation against a data source. So they are used basically to, for instance, in the case of the example on the screen, the get user, if it's attached to resolver that is itself attached to DynamoDB, the resolver will define all the operations and the query that has to be translated into a DynamoDB query. So in a way, you could see that resolvers are the glue between your schema and your data sources. In AppSync, as of today, resolvers are written in a language called the VTL language, which stands for Velocity Template Language. It's a templating language based on Java, and it's usually very known for not being easy to learn and to use. But hopefully, the AppSync team is going to release very soon an alternative to that, and it's JavaScript resolvers. So you will be able to write resolvers in JavaScript, and that makes it easier to learn and be also easier to test. Of course, if you want to, there's always the way to use Lambda. Lambda is not only a data source, but because it's written in a language, let's say JavaScript, it allows you to perform some custom logic easier than in VTL. So basically, you could just have a very stripped, very basic VTL template that only forwards the query to Lambda, and then have all your specific logic into Lambda. And what you can also do is you can skip completely VTL in the case of Lambda and attach directly Lambda to your queries. AppSync also comes with a special kind of resolvers, which are called pipeline resolvers. And pipeline resolvers actually allow you to execute more than one resolver for one specific query. It will execute them basically in a sequence, one by one, and pass the result from one to another. And it could be useful, for instance, if you want to first run a Lambda that will maybe validate the data. It will transform the data maybe as well. And then when you have your data shaped as you like and validated, you might just write it to DynamoDB for storage. And finally, you will return it to the client. And that's what pipelines are for, actually. Now, when you have an API, usually you want to make it secure. And here, AppSync comes with 5 different authentication and authorization methods. The first one, obviously, is Cognito, which allows you to create user pools, and those users will be able to call your GraphQL API. But also, you can use IAM if you want. That could be useful for system-to-system calls. It's not very common in GraphQL, I would say, but sometimes it can happen. Or if you use Cognito identity federations for using, let's say, a identity provider such as Google or Twitter, that can also be done using IAM. But if you have a custom authorizer or user management system, AppSync also supports OpenID Connect. An example of this would be Auth0 or FusionAuth that both support the OpenID Connect standard. And of course, AppSync supports them as well. API keys, of course, are used as well in AppSync. Usually, API keys can be used, for instance, if your API, you want it to be accessible by unauthenticated users or anonymous users. By default, AppSync does not support unauthenticated connections, but if you used an API key, for instance, that is hard-coded in your client, that could be a way to do it. And one last authorizer that was introduced very recently, a couple of months ago, is a Lambda resolver, Lambda authorizer. It works mostly the same as the API gateway Lambda authorizer, so it allows you to create a custom logic for authorization. One thing about AppSync is that you're also allowed to use more than one authorizer per API. So you can attach, for instance, one authorizer to a query and another authorizer to a mutation. And depending on which endpoint you want to call, the user or the client will have to authenticate against one or another authorizer. And one query or one mutation could also be attached to more than one authorizer. So you could have basically all the authorizers you want accessing to all your queries you want. Now, subscriptions. Subscriptions in AppSync and in GraphQL, I said earlier, is a way to allow users or clients to subscribe to changes in your data, in your API. So let's take an example. Maybe you have a client that subscribes to a Twitter tweet, and every time that someone likes it or retweets it, you want to receive a notification. So the client could create a notification, a subscription connection, which is a WebSocket connection to that tweet in particular. And each time that someone will like or retweet that tweet, your backend will publish a notification that will be received by the client. AppSync, in this case, takes care of everything. It will create the connection with the client, and it will fan out all the notifications that come from the backend or from other clients to all the subscribed clients. And I think I said earlier that AppSync supports millions of simultaneous connections without any issue. Okay, so now AppSync also supports caching capabilities. So caching is a way to store the response of an API call or of a resolver into low latency in-memory cache. AppSync leverages for this a Redis instance. And unfortunately, in this case, it's not fully serverless. It is fully managed, but you would still have to pay for the size of the instance. Depending on the size of the instance, you will have to pay a different price. And that is a by hour pricing model instead of per request. So for caching, you have two ways of doing this. You have per request, which will cache the full response of the request into memory, or per resolver. I explained earlier that resolvers are attached to fields or to queries, and you can individually cache every single resolver, and then if that resolver is reused in different queries, you will still benefit from that cache. You still also can define caching keys that will let your cache layer know how to access those keys and if the cache is a new entry or not. And the time to live of the cache is up to 1 hour. It can be smaller, it can be from 1 second to 1 hour. After that, the cache will be cleared and the data source will be hit again. And since very recently, I think last month or even this month, last month, we're in February already, they introduced a way to actually evict the cache based on the keys. So imagine that you have a user query that is being cached based on the user ID, and then a mutation will go and change that user. Maybe it will change the username or the birth date or whatever. Well, that mutation, if it knows the ID of the cache, it can say, okay, well, let's clear the cache, because then the next time that someone will request it, fresh data will be brought directly from the data source, and then it will recached. It will be recached again. Also, a new feature from last month is custom domains, and that was a long-awaited feature actually that has been finally delivered last month. Basically, it allows you to attach your API to a custom domain, so mycompany.com or whatever you like. And I think it's a great feature because I think one of the most one of the biggest complaint that there was in the past is that if for some reason, because of a issue in production or whatever, you lose your API, you lose your AppSync endpoint, and you have to recreate it, suddenly by default, you would get a brand new endpoint with some random string in the middle of it. And that could be a problem if your client is a compiled client, like an AppSync, like an Android or a iOS app that you cannot just update as easily as a website, for instance. So that's one use case that is great for custom domains. And the other one would be if you want to use blue-green deployments. So if instead of updating the existing API, you want to deploy a brand new one and then have it tested by QA or something like that. And when you're confident that it's good enough, you can simply switch the domain and make it point to the new API instead. And the clients will not notice it at all. There are a couple of limitations, though, with AppSync. And the first one is that you cannot use custom scalars. I think I forgot to explain what scalars are, but basically scalars are a base type for your schema. And by default, GraphQL itself comes with basic scalars like integers, floats, string, all that kind of basic types that you can find in almost any language. And on top of that, also, AppSync provides email, date time, I think IP, phone number, all these kind of types or scalars, as they call it in GraphQL, out of the box. But if you wanted some custom ones, I don't know, you wanted a custom ID or a custom field, that is actually not possible so far. As far as I can tell, it's never been a blocker for me, actually, but I think it still would be a nice to have. A second one, and I think that's a big one that's very often asked by the community, is that there is no schema federation. So what is schema federation? In a nutshell, it's a way to have one GraphQL API that wraps more than one other GraphQL APIs. So that's useful, for instance, if you have several teams. So you might have an e-commerce and you have a product team that will handle the product catalog API. Then you have a analytics team that will handle some maybe analytics features or recommendation API, stuff like that. And you might want to separate them because it's easier for different teams to manage different APIs, but you still want your clients, your front end, to use one single API because it's just easier. And what federation is a way to have one single API that will redirect all the queries to the underlying GraphQL APIs, depending on which one is called by the client. That is, something that is not available now, but hopefully that should come in the future. That's maybe a personal complaint I have about AppSync, that it's not completely compliant with the latest specs. I mentioned earlier that GraphQL is a specification. Well, it's actually versioned. I think the last version is from November or October last year. And I think that AppSync is currently at the June 2018 version or something like that. I think, though, I've heard from the AppSync team that they are working on fixing this. So hopefully this will come soon as well. Finally, I would like to give a bit of some resources, useful resources, if you want to learn AppSync or use AppSync. And the first ones will be for deployment. AppSync is deployable with basically any infrastructure as code library that you like. It's supported by Amplify, AWS SAM, the CDK, the serverless framework, and of course, CloudFormation. There are a bunch of them. There's more, but I think these are the 5 most common ones. And as far as the client is concerned, Amplify, which by the way is also related to the Amplify CLI, and they are both developed by AWS themselves. The Amplify.js library is part of the Amplify suite, and it allows you to write your client and connect it to your API. So it will handle for you authentication through Cognito or IAM out of the box and call your GraphQL endpoints. It will also have some in-memory cache in the client itself to avoid hitting the API more than once. So the second one would be the Apollo client. That's maybe my favorite. It allows you to maybe write some more custom implementation of your client. It's a very famous client for GraphQL as well. And another one, it's not a client this time, but the GraphQL code generator. It's actually CLI. It's a tool that allows you to read and parse your GraphQL schema and transform it into actual code types. If you are a user of TypeScript, for instance, it allows you to translate your GraphQL schema into TypeScript types. And it's super useful because you don't have to manage all these types in 2 places. You just manage it once in your schema, and then you generate, through a simple CLI command, you generate your TypeScript types. One last resource would be the GitHub for the AWS AppSync community, which is a place where you can ask questions if you're stuck, or ask for feature requests if you are missing something. And yeah, that's about it. So that's it for today. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for that. That was awesome.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Benoit. That was very insightful. So personally, I've known of GraphQL, but never really used it yet. So it's good to see some of this information myself. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
We have
if anyone has questions.
Yeah. There are. Rob asks, I wonder where to put the domain/business logic when using AppSync or GraphQL. For example, sending out domain events when an order is placed, or is it only to be used for data-driven applications?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question. So he wants to place domain events from AppSync. Is that right?
I think so, yeah, because the example he gives is sending out domain events when an order is placed.
Yes. Yeah, I think the only way to do that right now is through Lambda resolvers. You would have to create a Lambda that will execute your mutation, create your order, write it into DynamoDB, and then maybe publish an event into EventBridge, or maybe just use DynamoDB streams to do that as well. But another way to do this, actually, now that I think about it, would be to use pipeline resolvers. You could actually pipeline first execute your mutation, generate your order maybe in DynamoDB, and then the next step of this would be a Lambda that will put an event into EventBridge, or if you are if you dare so, you can actually use HTTP data sources to execute a request against the EventBridge API directly. So that way you can avoid actually Lambda.
That sounds like quite some different ways to get there. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, it's something you can do, but it's not easy because you have to know how to shape the payload, and you also have to make sure that the request is signed with signature v4. It's possible in AppSync. It's just a bit more complex to do, but it's absolutely possible. Yes.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Bioman also had a question, but it's already answered because they ask what would be the required or useful front-end packages applications to use AppSync, but you already provided that information in one of your last slides. Which one was your favorite you mentioned again?
Sorry, I missed that.
Oh, it was about consuming the data from AppSync in the front end. You mentioned a couple of packages.
Oh yeah, so the Amplify CLI and also Apollo client. Apollo client is a very popular graphical client it works for any graphical endpoint. Could be AppSync, could be directly an Apollo client, an Apollo server API. I think the only difference with the Amplify JS library is that Amplify JS is, of course, it's made for AppSync, so it will handle Cognito and IAM authentication out of the box without having to worry about it. On the other hand, with Apollo client, you would have to do it yourself. You would have to generate the token and inject it into the HTTP headers.
Right. Okay. So it's about convenience versus control, probably, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That sounds good.
Okay. And I've got a question from my side.
Yeah.
And that is, you were talking about the custom scalers not being available and that being a downside, but it's not really affected you. Is that just because you've not needed them, or is that because you've got some nice workarounds that people can use?
Exactly. I've never needed them actually. Maybe a workaround, if you're ready to, might be using a string, and then you would have to validate it in the backend if you need to, using a validation library like AJV or Joy or whatever you use. So that would be the workaround, yes. Actually, something I did not mention is a very useful custom scaler provided by AWS out of the box is a JSON scaler. So basically, if you had like a big chunk of things that you don't know what to do with and you don't know how to shape it, you don't know the type exactly, you could just fit it all into a JSON, and then AppSync will validate that it's a valid JSON, and your backend will even get a completely parsed version of it, and you can just use it out of the box.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds useful. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, there are no other questions on Discord.
We got some nice comments in the chat, though. It's an awesome session from Zach Jones Knoll, and from T. Richard. Thanks for the talk. Nice delivery.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Excellent.
Yeah, you're
Okay. Benoit, if you planning to hang out on our Discord, feel free to do so. If people have any
Sure.
other questions a
Yeah.
bit later, they can still ask them,
I
or
will.
they can find you on social media. So thanks a lot,
Of course.
Benoit.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you all.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
I think it's now time for a short break.
Yep.
I'd say let's do a 5-minute break.
Yep.
And
So we're
we'll
back at about 10 to Central European time.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
All
That's
right.
back, allemaal.
See you later.
And we're back.
Yes, hello everyone.
Hello again. So,
All right. Okay, so can you hear my music that my neighbor is playing or not?
I don't know if it's
think
an
so, eh?
unfortunately not or a thankfully not, but well, it's certainly not coming through here at least.
No. It's an electric guitar. It sounds pretty good, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with it, as long as it doesn't disturb our live stream.
Oh, you've got some nice background music.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's welcome our second speaker of today. That's Shreya. Hello there.
Hello there,
Hi.
Shreya.
Hi, it's nice to meet you, Stacey. I think this is the first time we've interacted. Mark, nice to see you again. How are you guys doing?
Yeah,
Well, not doing bad, thank you. Yourself?
I'm doing great too. Thank you for kind of letting me join in today in the meetup and learn a lot from Benoit, but also from you guys, and hopefully share a little bit of information from my end too.
Yeah,
thank you for giving up your time to join us.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really excited for your talk. Of course, I'm also a bit of personally invested with it because I have also played a part in it, but we'll hear about that soon a bit later. Anything you would like to share up front? What your current role is, what you're doing now, or is it part of your regular intro? Or just we can also give
Yeah,
the stage to you.
It's part of my intro, but I can go ahead and kind of get it started right now. So
Sure.
My name is Shreya, and I am currently a developer advocate at a very small startup called Courier. But I'm also behind the scenes, secret agent kind of type, a co-founder of a nonprofit that is built for students by students called Bit Project, and that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about today. So yeah.
Excellent. All right. Yeah. Let's get started. I'm very
absolutely looking forward to it. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Also, if you guys are able to hear me, that's great. If not, please feel free to let me know in the chat. If you have any questions about what I'm talking about, again, please let me know in the chat and I'll try to get through it either during the talk or afterwards, if not. But yeah, let's get into a little bit of who I am and why am I here today. So like I mentioned, I work for Courier, and I'm also the co-founder of a global student nonprofit that currently is a community of over 1,000 students, which is really awesome. And we're essentially just a group of students that really like to learn how to code. But for whatever reason, we either are struggling to code on our own. A lot of students don't have access to resources, or other students that have access to resources are out there and want to share that with each other. So that's essentially the gist of what Bit Project is. It's just a really amazing community that's all about sharing technical educational resources. Me personally, I was born in India and I kind of grew up around the world. So I was pretty privileged in that sense, where I was able to, get access to some really awesome education, meet a lot of people from a lot of diverse backgrounds. And that really helped me gain a great understanding of what an education system should be. I was able to experiment a lot. And I want to call out that privilege because that's something that's very rare. Like, not a lot of people get access to that, especially in a world where we're gearing towards, everything being technical, and definitely needing more software engineers in the industry, or just any type of technical person in the industry. It's really sad that there's not a lot of people out there that have access to that kind of knowledge. I graduated from UC Davis last year. So before then, I was working on this nonprofit, and I continued to do that like a lot of students do after graduating. But yeah, a little bit about why I'm here today. So I'm definitely not here to talk about serverless. I'd say most, if not all of you, have a lot more experience and a lot better quality experience when it comes to serverless than I do. So I'm not here to teach you anything that you already know, but I am here to talk a little bit about that educational experience, some of the struggles that students out there have faced and are facing, and hopefully maybe you relate to it. Not hopefully that you struggled, but like, in case you also went through those struggles, this is something that you're able to relate to and recognize. And if you didn't go through that, then I would love to share some of these experiences with you. And if you want to get involved and you want to kind of support other students in their educational journeys in the future, then maybe even get involved, which would be really awesome. But overall, the problem that we're facing right now is that for a lot of students out there, it's really difficult to get involved in tech, and it's really difficult to get started with side projects. whether you're going to a massive, institution that's based in education, or a small college or community college, or even if you're not attending any type of institution where you're able to learn how to code, regardless of the resources that you have available, unfortunately, the education system is not built to support students who want to build projects of their own. So it is essentially almost a machine that is helping students all learn the same content at the same time. But there's just so much to learn in tech that most students are barely able to touch certain aspects of it. They don't know what they should learn on their own, where they should get started, what access to resources they have beyond the classes that they're attending, let alone what types of projects they should be building on their own. So Serverless for Students is essentially a fun, guided way to help students build those projects. So we say, regardless of whether you have access to those resources or not, we're over here collecting everything that we can, collecting all of the information and experiences that we can, and providing that out to students in a much more structured form, where they're able to get the same type of information, but also apply it in their own unique ways. So it essentially starts with students learning serverless from scratch through our curriculum, which is a 4-week curriculum, and I'll get into each of the 4 weeks in a session. In a second, rather. Sorry, can't talk. And at that point, within those 4 weeks, they're learning essential technical skills that a lot of them have not ever really learned before. And then at the end of those 4 weeks, they get another 2 weeks to work on their own projects that they then get to present as well. So imagine a hackathon of some kind, but a lot more guided and a lot more experience-based. So yeah, what are we building? There's 3 main aspects to our ideology. One of them is that it needs to be a mentorship program. Since Bit Project, as a community of students, is for students by students, we do heavily acknowledge that we don't have the actual technical experience to teach serverless in the way that our mentors know. So we do source a lot of mentors. For example, Mark, he's one of them, who volunteer their time to help and teach students about their experience learning serverless. Part of my abstract for this talk was actually kind of explaining how most people in the world don't really get an understanding of what serverless is until they enter the industry. So even if you're going to a 4-year institution where you're learning computer science and you're getting that degree, there's no serverless course that teaches you, hey, this is what a serverless function is. This is how the architecture works. These are all of the options available to you. So if you're lucky and you are able to find some friends or are able to find a mentor who can teach you on your own, you might end up, getting some experience there. But most students actually don't even know what that is until they enter the industry and they're working on their first job or their second job. And then they're required to learn what it is, how it works on the job, go through the training there. So that's a large part of it, is getting your experiences as people who've gone through that process and sort of introducing it to students at a much earlier stage in their lives. The second part of it is that it is a coding boot camp, but we try to avoid calling it a boot camp as much as possible. It's not meant to be any type of a crash course. It's more supposed to be a place where students are able to learn and make mistakes and grow from those mistakes. We're all helping each other. So it's really just a playground. I think that's kind of like the best way that I like to explain it these days. It's an educational playground. And it's also a networking space. That is a key part of our program and our community in general. It's not just about making sure you understand what serverless is, building a project, but also seeing to it that you're able to take those skills and communicate them, and then hopefully, help yourself get a job. Because at the end of the day, that is the most important thing. Unfortunately, in our world, we need to make sure that our students are able to take their skills and get a job afterwards. So I'm going to get a little bit into, did I skip a slide? No. Into the 4 weeks and the actual final project aspect of it as well. So the very first week, we get students started with Azure Functions. each week consists of projects that they work on individually, challenge projects that they can do to demonstrate the skills that they learned during those earlier projects, and mentor sessions. So the projects are there for them to really learn each of the concepts at a very basic fundamental level slowly. So for example, for the first week, we have 2 projects called Hacker Voice and 2Cats API. We love throwing in a lot of like quirky themes in there. So there's a lot of like secret agent spy stuff, and there's a lot of cats in our curriculum. The first one teaches them the basics of how to get started with a trigger function, an HTTP trigger function. The second one is them essentially just learning how GET and post requests work so that they're able to then take that knowledge on into their final projects and work well with APIs. The challenge project is really fun. They kind of start getting involved with using serverless functions to translate content from English to Morse code. I've seen a lot of students take that on to then translate a lot of different languages and use that in more functional projects as well. And then the mentor sessions are honestly my favorite part of it. It's when students get to sit down with a professional from the industry one-on-one and actually have a conversation about how that mentor executes code, goes around like writing their code in the industry for their job. They actually have a task, like a goal, where they have to complete some sort of like a project together, sitting in a Zoom call, and they switch off. So one week you'll have the mentor showing and demonstrating, hey, this is how I code, this is how I think, this is how I ask myself questions, and when I don't know what to do, this is how I Google things, this is how I research. And so the student is essentially sitting there watching this, mentor, this experienced professional coder in their element, coding some really relatively easy project. But the goal of it is not at this stage to help them gain those technical skills, but more to gain those pair programming skills and communication skills when it comes to tech. And then the next week, you'll switch off. So you'll have students actually taking what they learned in the previous week from the mentors and then reapplying that as well. And then going back to the mentor and saying, okay, listen, here is what I got from you, and this is how I would go about solving a different problem. So that's essentially structurally what each week looks like. In the second week, we start working more hands-on with APIs. So we have a project where they're working with GIFs and they're using APIs to kind of analyze emotions within images. They're using the Spotify API for a song project, and they have another mentor session that week as well. In the third week, they start incorporating databases. It's really cool because the Bunny Image API is actually a project that was built by a student a couple of years ago. And that's one of the really awesome things. The entire curriculum was built by students who were previously part of the serverless camp themselves. So the first iteration was just a group of us, ragtag friends that wanted to learn serverless and also help teach other kids. But we constantly got feedback, and we got students from the program to then come back and help improve the curriculum. And it's definitely like drastically changed from the first iteration, but it's all dependent on how the students are learning and how invested they are in helping other students in the future learn as well and improving their presence. So Emily Chen is one of our high school students who participated in the second iteration of the camp. And her Bunny Image project actually went on to become a core aspect of our curriculum in week 3 to just teach students how databases work. And then for the fourth week, we start getting them to use front end and build their own front end. They continue on the Bunny Image project and they create a front end for that, plus the challenge and the mentor sessions, which continue weekly as well. So after the first 4 weeks, the students have gained a certain amount of technical skills, and they're constantly able to go back to that knowledge, constantly able to read through their notes, read through the curriculum, re-practice those exercises that they already did, go back and talk to their mentors if they have any questions. But once it reaches the latter 4 weeks of the program, they can start building their own projects. And at this stage, they're going to take everything that they've already learned, break it down in their own way, and then come up with a problem that they really want to solve, a timeline within like when they want to be able to fix that problem, going from like ideating all the way to finishing that project and then creating a presentation for it. And then at the end of it, we have a full-on Serverless Days conference, which is really awesome because Serverless Days has been a massive support for this program itself and helping elevate the voices of the students that are involved. At the end of the 8th week, they all get to present their projects at the conference itself, which is an incredible experience for them, because now they're actually able to show other engineers in tech and show off the work that they did, which is really fun. So what did we do it? I don't know what I was trying to say in this slide. I'm really sorry about that. I think it's supposed to say, how do we do it? So the process was learning how to learn. That was a large part of it. I think one of the biggest struggles that our students faced when they were in institutions learning how to code is that they were learning from professors and instructors who had been teaching for decades, which means that they themselves were students well before that. And they have, like, they're great people, they're amazing professors, but they don't have as much recent experience about how the current generation thinks and works. So one of the most important aspects of teaching for us is making sure that we understand how our current students are learning, which changes not only on a year-to-year basis, but almost on like a month-to-month basis, especially with like the pandemic, right? Like people's lifestyles, their learning lifestyles are changing drastically. So part of it is that people learn as individuals, and they also learn well alongside communities, which can be kind of contradictory. But it is important to incorporate both of those aspects where students are able to sit and learn on their own, but they're also able to sit and learn alongside other students, where they're able to really recognize that they all have similar problems and they're all able to help each other, which is why, although the curriculum itself is individual and they have their own projects, most of it is taught to them by other students that have already participated in the program previously. And they, it's all fresh to them. They just learned it. They understand the struggle. They understand the difficulties of learning serverless from scratch, especially at that age. And they're able to relay what they've learned back to the newer students. And then obviously from the mentors, like we mentioned earlier, it is so important for us to recognize that we are not professionals and that we need the help of people like you who do have that experience, to share it with us. So when it comes down to the individual learning aspects, there are virtual learning sessions. It is a virtual program so that we're able to make it as accessible as possible to students around the world. So we have pair programming sessions where we get some of our mentors to actually live program with one of our student instructors. And then the students participating in the program are able to ask questions live as well, and then kind of go about seeing how this professional would solve a problem and a part of the project on Twitch, on live. We have these camp counselors that are really awesome, that are all previous students helping other students learn. We have work sessions where they're able to really communicate with each other, talk to each other, learn from each other, socialize, but also help each other set goals and achieve them, and really just stay motivated and stay on track for the course itself. And then there's a one-on-one educational experience, which is you're learning from the best, from the mentors, who honestly, the great part about mentors is that they don't act like they know everything. That's not why they're there. They're there to show you that as an engineer, most of the time you don't know anything at all. And like the important thing is being able to learn how to learn, exactly what we're trying to teach our students as well. And this is great because we're able to tailor the program to each individual needs because we have this individual aspect to it. And these are some of our camp mentors. Mark is also one of our camp mentors, if you've seen that earlier. And then one of the second parts of building this entire kind of educational experience is making sure that it is really a playground field. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a boot camp, but we're not trying to crash course and make sure you get everything right. And you're able to leave with a really perfect project that you can showcase and maybe never touch again. The goal is for students to be able to experiment and to feel comfortable experimenting. We want them to be able to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, to own those mistakes and then figure out how they can improve on them in the future. We want them to feel comfortable with failure, if that makes sense, because you're constantly going to fail and it's absolutely okay to do that. That's one of the biggest things that our mentors teach our students too. Like, you're not supposed to know everything and you're not supposed to get it right the first time. You're supposed to know how to make those mistakes and improve from them. So the playground is like a really important part there. The goal is obviously developing those key technical skills that we talked about earlier, and then building projects that are demonstrating the skills that they've made, and then going forth and actually demonstrating them at conferences, at meetups, in interviews for jobs and everything. Awesome. Sorry if I'm going a little fast, but if you have any questions, just feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can ask at the end as well. The last part of our process, like our scientific method that went into building this program, was actually improving with feedback. Feedback is not always positive. I was trying to find feedback that was like entirely positive, but I felt like that would be ingenuine. But our program from day one has been heavily dependent on getting feedback from students and mentors on how every small aspect of it works, whether that's like the first 5 minutes of a live stream and what they liked or didn't like about it, all the way up into just the entire structure of the program, the quality of the content that we're putting forth. Our team constantly gains the feedback through meetings and coffee chats and online forums, and we take that feedback to continue improving that program. We actually focus on improving the program while it's happening as well, so that students are able to see that their voices are being heard and that they're improving. For example, last summer, we actually changed the entire course of the program by removing the live streams halfway through and replacing them with pre-recorded videos that were longer but a lot more detailed, because we recognized that the students in that cohort were students that were from a lot more diverse backgrounds. They were also, a lot of them had very little coding experience compared to our previous cohorts. So it's definitely really important for us to take feedback and make sure that we're implementing and acting on it as soon as possible. And that really just like improves the experience for everyone, ourselves included, but definitely for our students and mentors as well. And then what did we discover? What were the results of this program that we've built so far? One of the results is that we have this incredible, diverse group of students. Just in our last cohort, we had 5 international students. 18 of them were based in the US, but it was really great to be able to expand beyond just our kind of time zones and reach out to students that were in other time zones and from other countries. We had 2 high school students, 17 college students, and 4 veterans that were either working full-time or part-time at the time. We were actually able to reach out to those veterans by partnering with other nonprofits that are specifically there to support veterans get into tech. And then we had 9 students with no coding experience and 14 students with coding experience. So this was definitely something that's really important to us as well. We're not trying to build a program that is all about, building really cool projects and getting students to look really good in front of the camera, but rather finding students that we know are probably going to struggle in the course, but are able to overcome that struggle at their own pace and then build a project that they're going to be proud of afterwards. And overall, we've had 13 non-traditional students. So students that had no coding experience, students from other non-traditional backgrounds who otherwise might not even have gotten into tech on their own, which is really exciting. And we're really hoping to keep this level of diversity and maybe even increase it in the future. Our student successes. So Fifi is one of our students from the very first cohort, and I want to kind of show you an example of the project that she made. It was an Amazon price monitor, which I think is very relevant nowadays, just to know, like, keep track of all of the things that are online and the things that you want to buy and how the prices change. She came in with little to no coding experience into the program. She struggled a lot in her first few weeks, but she ended up building one of the best projects that we've seen in the entire last 3 years. Her project uses HTTP trigger functions, time functions, SQL, and the Twilio SMS API, which is really cool to see her kind of use as every aspect of the course that she had learned. And then here are some of the other really awesome projects that our students have built. I do want to shout out Ganning specifically. He was a student in our last cohort, which was last summer in 2021. And he was an absolute genius. He whizzed through the entire program within the first week or two. But he actually went on to take the curriculum and improve on it, and even build an actual GitHub bot that could help streamline our coding and like teaching process. So thanks to him and his final project, we were able to create a bot that actually helped students grade their projects, which we didn't have as a feature previously. So that was really cool. We have Evelyn, who had a climate change based project. We had Grace, who had an eco maps project. We've had all sorts of like productivity projects like Kaylee did. But yeah, it's really cool to see the work that all of the students are doing. And what's next? Future plans. We're going to have a lot more summer camps coming up. Our goal is to really, we're going to end up decreasing the size of students in the mentorship program to 6 students. Last year we had 23. But we're going to really focus on increasing the size of the number of students that are able to participate worldwide, regardless of when they're participating and where they're participating from, which time zone, et cetera. And really the goal is one day, hopefully, to be able to make it accessible to anyone at any time. So yeah, if you're interested in getting involved, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you. That was a little shorter than I was expecting it to be, but hopefully that was all right.
That's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Shreya. It was good to see all the details. So, although I have been involved, I was not aware of everything that you just mentioned. So, even for me, it was very useful to see this. So, thanks a lot for this.
It seems such an absolutely amazing program.
Thank you so
it must
much.
be so fulfilling.
It is. It's honestly the best. For me personally, I had like a really bad time learning how to code too earlier in college. So it's so nice to see students who are kind of facing those same struggles and making sure that they don't feel like they have to drop out or change courses that early on.
Yeah, it's nice, and it's really difficult to set such a thing up. I mean, I've got Azure Functions University where I'm trying certain stuff, but yeah. Yes, setting up I like the word, the educational playground. I think it's a good term for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really tricky, and it's really time consuming to set it up and to maintain it, and yeah, to get also to get people involved as well. Yeah. So I definitely have a question around that. So how do you find your audience? How do you find your students? What are ways you do to attract those people?
So we actually, first and foremost, we work with like schools around the world. We have access to like advisors, so computer science and other major advisors that have been really helping us find students that are in colleges and high schools as well. So we reach out to a lot of like counselors at high schools and see if there's students that are like really finding that spark, that interest in computer science, but they don't really have anywhere to get those resources from, especially at their own schools. And then the second way is that we reach out to like nonprofits all around the US that are, for example, Operation Code was the one that helped us get access to veterans who are interested in learning how to code. So working with nonprofits like that.
Have we lost? Hey, I think you
Sorry,
froze
did
for
you
a
lose
second,
me?
Mark.
I'm sorry.
I was frozen.
Okay.
Oh, yes, a great comment there from Richard. It's as serverless professionals, we tend to say that serverless simplifies ops, but it generally shifts some of the complexity to other places in the stack. What are the main troubles students face when starting with serverless, and on which subjects do they stumble?
So we do have to simplify serverless down a lot when it comes to this program specifically. A lot of it is just introduction, making sure they feel comfortable with serverless. So we don't really get into the complexity of all of that. We focus specifically on Microsoft Azure functions and making sure that they're able to set up that. I think one of like the biggest struggles that they face is not even on the serverless side. It's that a lot of them have never coded before. So they're like learning these languages. They're learning what an API is, the fact that like a server is a thing, and then going on and realizing, okay, like if we have servers, why serverless, right? Like what's the point of all of that? So just understanding those like very fundamental concepts is difficult, but over time they do push through. There are a lot of really hardworking students, and they're there because they really want to make a difference in their own lives.
Yeah, it was a good question indeed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I got another question. So what would your advice be to someone who wants to start something similar?
Like a similar program?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Maybe in a whole different technology or whatever, but because you've been doing this for a couple of years, so you know what not to do, for instance. So what shouldn't they do?
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing that we struggled with organizing this program was we were so focused earlier on in building something that would work for us that we would often lose sight of like what the students needed. So definitely, regardless of what the program is, whether it's serverless, whether it's another technology, making sure you understand what each individual student's needs are and like constantly staying in communication is definitely like the most important thing, especially if it's like a relatively smaller program. The larger number of students that you have, that becomes a lot harder. But if you have a small program that's like catering to like X number of students and you're able to get feedback from them and talk to them, then keep talking to them. Honestly, I wish professors at my college did that too when I was there. I feel like they would have learned a lot.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
My uni days flashing back in front of me now. That would have been awesome if they'd have done that.
Also the feedback thing is so important. So it's very good that you do that on a very regular basis and on multiple levels. So that's also what I like a lot.
I love when you were saying it, learning from mistakes.
Yeah.
But it's not only the students learning from their own mistakes, it's the fact that you also have that introspection for yourself. Is
honestly,
I think it's a really rare thing, and it's such a shame that it's such a rare thing.
It is a shame because like once you're in the industry, you're going to be making mistakes all the time. And the worst thing that I've seen is like I've struggled with this a lot, is feeling like when I make a mistake, like I can't tell anyone and I can't admit it even to myself, which is like the worst roadblock, because then you're kind of losing out on a lot of opportunities to learn from that. So definitely it's when students are getting into tech and it's like their beginnings of getting into tech, let them know that it is absolutely okay to mess up so that they don't have that kind of mentality going forwards.
Definitely. Yeah. It's almost so important that you would almost, if a lecturer or mentor does a lesson, you almost want to make them mistakes on purpose to show that it's actually a good thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, nice. Okay, I do have another question. So you mentioned in some time you want to have this program available to everyone all the time. So what do you think are some of the key components that you need to get there?
So right now, our program really is heavily dependent on like the mentorship part of it, but also the camp counselor, the students that have previously been in it who also are helping other students in the future. So we definitely want to reach a point where our curriculum can stand on its own. I know, Mark, you're actually really good at this. You've been building a lot of like YouTube videos and serverless content that teaches students how to do serverless. We don't have that. We've depended a lot on like live streams and like teaching students content the week of the time that they're working on those projects.
Mhm.
So we would love to reach a point where we have these videos that are maybe not timeless, but at least last for a few years or a few months. And that way students can kind of pick it up at their own pace at any time. And they don't have to rely on a program that's set in the summer, for example.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. All right. I see someone is still typing it on Discord. So there might be another question.
Drum roll, please.
Yeah, exactly. No pressure. No. Now they stop typing. Oh no, they still.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, Shreya, you maybe want to do a shout out to anyone who is watching now or whenever this is rewatched later, if you're still looking for either students or mentors. So I'll give you, let's say, another minute to do that.
Definitely. So we actually are going to be opening our applications both for students and mentors this Friday. I mean, we're going to be announcing that on our social media. I wish I had the forms. I'm so sorry I'm behind on that. But our Twitter is BITPRJ, Bit Project. So if you find us there, we'll be posting about it over there with all of the information related to how to get involved, what you need, and all of those things.
You can definitely add the link to the notes and description later. So just
Awesome.
You can post that. That's fine.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see any further questions. So thank you very much for sharing this and good luck with the rest of the program.
Fantastic
Thank
session.
you so
Good
much.
luck.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You
Bye.
too. Yeah, bye.
All right.
There we are.
There we are.
First
Yeah.
one of 2022.
It
in the
felt
bag.
good. Yeah, exactly. I liked it.
Yeah,
let's
it's
do more
great
of
to
it.
be back to awesome talks.
Exactly. Yeah, and and we should be back next month.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't have speakers yet, I think. So if you are interested for a speaking slot, please contact us. And again, if you want to be involved in some other way in ServerlessDays Amsterdam, that's you're also very welcome to do that. With that, I wish you all a very nice day, and until the next one.
Till the next time. See you on the first Wednesday of March.
Exactly. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.